The River Tyne cut its course about 30 million years ago, forming the river we see today. But the footprint that human industry has left on the river is more recent and less enduring. Today, the banks of the Tyne are dominated by the industries of the 19th and 20th centuries, but even these developments are subject to the tides of change. As we sail up to Newcastle, we can see that the shipbuilding has gone. But the north shores of the river are still home to a wide range of industrial activity, mostly related to sea technology. Coming into Newcastle, the new Millennium Bridge catches the eye, but it is the great bridges built across the Tyne that are still the established landmarks of the city. The Tyne Bridge, the High Level Bridge and the Swing Bridge. The Swing Bridge was built by Lord Armstrong to open up the west end of the river to big ships and the vast factories that were the fulcrum of his armaments industry. At the height of the First World War, some 100,000 people worked in the West End riverside industries, making guns, ships, tanks, shells, in the workshops grafted onto the banks of the river. But by the 1970s, the tide had turned, and much of the industry had vanished, leaving only memories and voices.
This is a site of what was Richardson's Leather Works, a large tannery just north of the Tyne. I was 17 in 1959 when I started, and the idea was that I'd never ever clocked in before. I didn't know what a clock was. So the whole top and bottom was that the idea is I went up and seen this person in the entrance of the foyer. I didn't know what it was at that time. And I told him who I was, and he said, "Oh yes." He said, "I've got your card." And he gave us a card and he says, "Punch it in there." And I said, "Sorry, I don't know what it is." He came around and he showed us what to do, and I had to clock it in. And it was 7:20. I always remember that. And you had to clock in by 7:30. The main access of the site was on Dunn Street. At Richardson's, hides came in, raw hides from the abattoir, and what went out was beautiful, soft, shining leather that was sent to Northampton to make shoes. My job within the factory was a lister driver, and I used to move things around the factory, such as chemicals. Formaldehyde was one of them, I remember, and the finished leather. The first day at work was very, very scary. Fortunately, I think with hindsight, I didn't know some of the chemicals I was transporting, or the dangers that could have been there with them. But never mind, I learnt them, and everybody was there at every place to help you. There were several hundred people worked there. A lot of them were families and generations of families. There were lots of different shops in the sites, all doing something different. The fleshing shop, the lime pits, because I would have to take off the hair of the animal, and then through various other shops and into the finishing shops, where it would end up as absolutely spot on, the beautiful leather. This is the entrance to the old Richardson Leather Works. Right? On the left is where the hides came in, raw. In the summer they were quite smelly. In the winter they were frozen. On the right in the top yard used to be the higher building, a 4 stories high, where was the drying sheds. Straight along was the fleshings and the lime pits, and the finishing shops was at the far end. From day one, I felt as though I was part and parcel of the team. It was a great place to work. I think I would have been there much, much longer if it hadn't closed down.
As we move upstream, we come to the Newcastle Business Park, built on the huge 25-hectare site of the old Vickers Armstrong Works. It's hard to imagine what this site was once like.
I worked at the Vickers Armstrong site from 1942 to 1964. My father and my grandfather had both worked there before me at Berkeley all their lives, and it was my father who had got me the job in into the metallurgical laboratory. When I first started at the laboratory, our main function was examining steel, particularly if it had anything wrong with it, to try and find out why it was wrong and make certain it didn't happen again. Now this is Water Street, one of the main entrances into the Vickers. There was only two, but this is one of them.
Yes, this is the old, roughly where the old entrance used to be, around about here. Over that side was the steelworks, and over that side was the tank works. And bag, it's changed a lot now though, hasn't it? Yes.
I started in Vickers in the 60s. Most of my time was done in the steel foundry at Elsick, which was hard, hot and thirsty. My father said he was a miner and he wasn't going to send me down the pits. So he got me a job in the Vickers, which is just as hard and dirty as it was doing the mines, and a lot more dangerous, I thought, especially being a little kid from school, going into there. It was a big, bad place. We used to fashion steel. We used to make for submarines and all sorts of Navy guns and that. But it was a good work, hard work. I was a hammer driver. It's a hammer driver that fashions steel. It was so noisy, we just had to use hand signals. Vickers, stretching from Scotchwood to Elsick, was a massive site. It was like a mini city where you could spend all day and you wouldn't see a quarter of it. I mean, they even had their own train system inside the works. It was a massive place, Vickers. I used to walk around and I used to see them doing the big guns, turn them end over end. Then they used to put them on a big carriage and take them out to load them onto a ship, and that used to take them down the tide.
Going round the site now, there's very little you can remember. One of the things I do know is my office was built over some arches, and the arches are still there to this day.
This is the only bit of the site that I recognise, these arches. My offices used to be up there somewhere, but exactly where I don't know.
We used to get samples from the steelworks. Then we would examine them to see the nature of the structure, and you could usually tell A, if it was all right, or B, if there was something wrong with it.
Now, RVA building, now that's all this area here and down below used to be the brass department area where they made brass castings and they made the plate for making the cartridge cases. Started over big slabs and roll them down to about that thick, and then they press them out, not here, in one of the other shops further down.
Well, I started work when I was 15, and I worked there till 1979. I got made redundant. And all I got for 18 years was £1,000. I went for job interviews, but as I say, I was too old.
By the time I left, Vickers was still in business. The machine shops were all still working. There was still a certain amount of guns being made. Of course, the trouble is, keeping a factory that size going, it needed an awful lot of work, and once the armaments effectively had stopped. One of the reasons why I left, because things were starting to change. I mean, within a very relatively short space of time, Vickers had all closed out, and that was the end of it. The Scots work was still going strong a bit, but even that's gone now, of course.
Although the riverbank was dominated by industry, there was some housing close to the Tyne, situated right in the midst of the hurly-burly rush and excitement of the factories.
This is where Southview Terrace and Paradise Street ended. It was all pulled down in 1979 and nothing was done about it, just a billboard and a lot of landscape. I used to come down here, look out the bedroom window over to the river and see all the activity. The railway ran from down where that blue bridge over the road, it ran all the way down there towards Scotswood Newburn, down that way. And of course they changed the line and it's all been diverted and that's gone. Well, Southview Terrace was on the main Scotswood Road and Paradise Street was behind. Second one along on the photograph is my grand's house, which was 12 Southview Terrace. And the next one is the view from Grand's big bedroom window. Well, when we used to look over out the upstairs bedroom window, we could see the river, the traffic on the river. The railway line used to pass in front of our house and the road. And so there was lots of activity going on. And when my dad used to come home for lunch, we could hear the siren going in the Armstrongs. And we knew that was the time the men were coming home. So there were tram cars in them days. And the men, it was full of men, these tram cars. And some were hanging on the back of the rail. And after a while, they started waving to us, and we felt like the railway children. Now and again, the tanks would come up, but they didn't come up on lorries then. Used to come on the road itself, and Dad used to say, you know, they'll make that road terrible. You know, it'll damage with these things, because my dad made the top, you know, the top gun that swivels around the tank. Well, he made the top bit where when they're in the tank and they're going to shoot a target, it keeps straight by this mechanism. So when they're fighting, even though the tank's going down in bumps in the fields or wherever, it's still hitting its target. So my dad used to make that part of the tank. So he used to be throwing the bits when he saw it coming by, so the bit he made.
As we travel upstream, we come to the site of the Jobling Purser Company.
The reason we're here is the extraordinary business of our neighbour, the Armstrong armaments business. They started to build warships at the Elswick Works around about 1890, not long after they built the Swing Bridge, which was fine because they were turning out a complete warship and everything in that warship was built on site. Unfortunately, as the Navy demanded bigger and bigger ships, the Swing Bridge suddenly got in the way and they couldn't pass through the Swing Bridge. So the naval yard had to move out of Elswick to somewhere downstream. And we did a swap in 1917, precisely 100 years ago. We came up here to a disused site, which I think had been a brickworks. It's also got buried in history, but so we took over this site, which is probably a lot bigger than we needed, but it was there. And I don't know whether any money changed hands, but there was a war on, and there were urgent need to be doing certain things, and we were only too happy to accommodate them.
The company's Jobling Purser Limited, and we were doing different things with different products till about 1927, and we started getting involved with paints and bitumen emulsions, which is part of what we still do now. Bitumen emulsions are used in the highways maintenance industry. The asphalt plant is a tall structure over there. We put that went commercial in 2012, and we basically we supply everything from utility contractors to the big highway surfacing contractors. Where we are here is on the site of what was, or very close to the Elsick train station. Where we're actually standing here is where one of the mine shafts were. The mine shaft here, I was told, was 4 meters wide and 95 meters deep and ran down vertically to what they call the Durham Hollow Drift. When we were first here, the river was fully navigable to freight. So up until that time, we were bringing materials in via the river, which you can see is ideal for us.
As a small boy, I can remember seeing a line of ships stretched one after the other, tied up, waiting to load coal. And there were also colliers at anchor in the middle of the river, waiting to load. And the movement of ships was colossal. But with the demise of the coal industry, it just gradually faded. So the river now is very silted compared to what it used to be.
Back in the 70s, when I visited the site when I was a kid, it stank and it was rotten. It really was, and it's totally improved now. You know, it's the Environment Agency, whose office is just down there, have done a great job in tidying it up. And as a business on the site, we have to be very careful with our housekeeping, which is great. You know, all the businesses on the riverside have to be careful. Since the Tyne has been tidied up in the last sort of 20 years, we've seen seals, and there has been an otter seen up here, which is fantastic. But the seals are fantastic. You know, you just don't expect to see them, and you look out there and go, oh my God, that's a seal.
The Vickers plant was a state-of-the-art manufacturing unit built on the site of their old works.
This is the way I went to work from 1982 right up till the day I retired. Walked these stairs every day, and I've lived in Scotswood all my life. I've had a really good life living in this area. Worked at Vickers, and I think as a child I was meant to work at Vickers, because waking up as a small child during the war years, the factory was thriving, and the thousands of men who worked in the factory used to walk to work every morning. The hooters of the factory used to go off early in the morning. The streets of Scotswood were alive with working men in the thunderous boots, so they used to wake me up every morning. What a thrill that was for me, never knowing that I would end up working for that factory myself. Looking in the Evening Chronicle, it said Vickers Defence Systems requires a single lady. Only ladies need apply. Single, divorced or widowed ladies need apply to train as a recruitment officer. So I walked down to the factory because it was just at the bottom of the street, put in my application, had the interview on the Friday. A very successful interview. He was very impressed with me. He said, when could I start? I said, well, I'm available anytime. I'm a single lady. I can join you anytime you like. He said, how about Monday? Wowee. I said, yeah, I can do that. So I joined them on the 7th of March, 1970, and worked there right up until my retirement in 2000. We moved down to the new factory, which was Scotswood Armstrong Works, which is based on Scotswood Road. The August bank holiday of 1982. It was beautiful, absolutely perfect. It was meant to encourage the workforce to walk through the factory every day so that you saw the product. And whatever we were doing, Challenger tanks and all of these kind of things, we saw them being built.
Vickers was basically an armaments factory, and the main product was battle tanks. I started work in Vickers 1982 at Scotswood Works. which was local to where I lived. Yeah, I started off as a floor worker, on the floor, a labourer, and finished up at the end of the day assembling these battle tanks and things like that, which I thought was a great achievement. I was offered the chance of becoming a fitter. A fitter was a man who actually did all the fine work and assembly work and putting things together, fitting. The product that I worked on was Titan. And this is Titan, which is a bridge layer recovery vehicle as well. It would take about 3 weeks to build a one. We just all sort of work together. We all just work as a team.
We're actually at the bottom of Robert Street and the 57 stairs which led on to Scotswood Road and down to Billy Wheeler's dance hall and the Hors d'Armes. And I used to walk down here every day to work. Run down the street, run down the stairs, 57 of them, and off to work every morning.
This is the Challenger 2. It's nice to see. We worked on this and it was excellent. Here you see the main vehicle, the whole vehicle together, turret and hull. We used to call that the marriage. Marrying the turret and the hull to become one.
The men had a great sense of pride. If I see a one that's got a multiple of my number, I'll say to the kids, you can't not build that.
We'd supplied the Gulf War with all the chieftain tanks and Challengers, and so we weren't producing anymore. The factory was declining. Eventually, yes, it was decided that Vickers would close.
Situated between the Newburn and Scotswood bridges, Adams's was another large industrial site that provided considerable employment for the people of Scotswood and Elsick. Adams's was a clay works, and on this site they carried out a complete production process from the extraction of clay through to the manufacture of bathroom suites, which were exported worldwide. There were coal mines right across the West End, all now vanished. As we travel under the Western Bypass Bridge, we come to the entrance of the Low Montague Pit, which was closed in 1934 after suffering a disastrous flood in 1925, which claimed the lives of 38 men and boys. The local Scotswood community has raised a memorial to the lives that were lost. The cone of the old glassworks can still be seen from the Tyne.
A lot of people think the big kiln that is still standing was part of the works, but that hadn't been used since the 19th century. I started work at GB Glass in Leamington in March 1973. The reason I went to work at the glassworks was my husband was in ill health and I'd always worked in offices. Now, my daughter was getting married in the October, so we needed extra money for that. I was paid about £5 a week in office work, but when I went to the glassworks, it went to about £20 a week. The first day I started there, I thought, oh my goodness, I'd never worked in an atmosphere like that before. It was dirty, it was smoky, it was hot, it was boring work. Oh, I thought, no, I'm not going to last this. I won't even last a week, never mind any longer. But after 23 years, I never got used to the work. I never got used to the factory, but I did like the people who worked there. We all helped each other out. Didn't matter what the situation was. It was a good comradeship, and that's really what kept me there. You had to inspect the bulbs. The blowers made the bulbs. They came in direct from the blowers in boxes. They were still hot. You didn't have a lot of safety wear in those days. You had an overall, a coat overall for the ladies, and a pair of small gloves. They were like cotton gloves, sort of to protect your hands, which they were no good at protecting hands. You got some terrible cuts and things like that. This was the main factory yard. This was the fitting shops, went right down to the bottom. That was the main entrance into the glassworks. Down this side was the transport side, and behind that was just grassland. I always worked as an inspector. Started with the bulbs, and I did that all the time I was there. There was about 600 people originally, but by the time we finished at the end of 23 years, when the Leamington Glassworks actually closed down, there was hardly 100 people working there, and I was the only inspector left there.
Industries may change, move on, vanish. It seems the old songs live on.
I went to Bladen races, 'twas on the 9th of June, 1862 on a summer's afternoon. We took the bus for Bamburgh's and she was heavy laden. Away we went along Collingwood Street, that's on the road to Bladen. Oh, me lads, you should have seen us gunning, passing the folks along the road just as they were standing. All the lads had losses there, all with smiling faces, gathered along the Scotchwood Road to see the Bladen races.